Ash, I didn't say anything. What could I have said? I was a nobody. My name wasn't even on the payroll. I was a friend of a friend, paid in cash and leftovers. But as I walked home that night, the word stuck to me like grease, peasant food. I thought of my mother, standing barefoot in our old kitchen, grinding masala by hand, tasting curry off her finger, humming old songs. She had fed 30 wedding guests with nothing but a stove made from bricks and an iron pot. Peasant food. That food had carried generations. 2 weeks later, fate decided to make things interesting. Hey, Raj! Was Diego, the sous chef, Waving chef short on staff for the gala next week. You up for some prep work? The gala turned out to be the Silver Spoon Culinary Invitational, an invite-only event where the world's best chefs competed for a $100,000 prize and international press. La Lumiere was one of the featured restaurants, and Chef Morel would be presenting his new dish, deconstructed lobster thermidor with champagne air and caviar dust. I said yes, of course. But inside, I wasn't thinking about the paycheck. I was thinking about Amelia's laughter. The week leading up to the event was chaos. The kitchen ran 20 hours a day. I peeled mountains of garlic, diced onions until my eyes burned, and plated more amuse-bouches than I could count. Still, I watched. I learned. I memorized every move Lucien made, how he handled the knife, the rhythm of his seasoning, the way his sauces reduced to glossy perfection. One night, when the others had gone home, I stayed behind. I opened my own small container of marinated lamb, onions, and herbs, my mother's recipe, the one I'd carried from home. The smell filled the kitchen like a memory. I cooked quietly, afraid of being caught. But I wasn't alone. Smells interesting. It was Amelia. She stood in the doorway, her tone dripping with amusement. What are you cooking, kitchen boy? Première phrase. Just something from home. She walked closer, eyeing the pot. Home, as in, the peasant food. I felt my jaw tighten. Yes, ma'am, she smirked. Well, at least you're self-aware. She leaned in, sniffing the aroma. You really think people here would eat? This, maybe, I said quietly. If they tasted it, her laughter echoed off the steel counters. Cute, maybe one day you'll make it out of the dish pit. I said nothing. But as she walked away, her words became the fuel I didn't know I'd needed. That night, I made a decision. The following morning, I signed up for the open wildcard entry in the Silver Spoon competition, a slot reserved for emerging culinary talent. I didn't have sponsors, training, or recognition. Just a borrowed chef's jacket, my knives, and one recipe that meant everything to me. The judges didn't know who I was when I arrived at the event hall. To them, I was another nameless contestant. But to me, it was more than a competition. It was vindication. When the pairings were announced, I almost laughed out loud. Fate had a sense of humor. The wildcard entrant, me, had been matched against Chef Lucien Morel, the man whose wife had called my food peasant. When Lucien saw my name on the bracket, his eyebrow arched. You? He said, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. You're competing. Yes, chef, I said evenly. Amelia appeared behind him, her lips curling in a slow, cruel smile. Oh, this will be fun. She had no idea just how right she was. When I walked into the competition kitchen that morning, my hands were steady. But my chest carried the kind of quiet storm you only feel when something sacred is at stake. Et all buzzed. With camera crews, reporters, and the heavy scent of butter, ambition, and nerves. Stainless steel counters gleamed under white lights. The air hummed with the clatter of pans and the rhythmic chop of knives. Lucien Morel stood 3 stations away, his pristine whites pressed and embroidered with his name in gold thread. The mec he'd been born for. This stage, confident, effortless, and perfectly composed. Beside him, Amelia leaned against the railing, designer, sunglasses perched atop her hair despite the indoor lighting. When her gaze found me, she smirked as though the entire event was some private joke between us. I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. Instead, I unpacked my kit, my 2 knives. Both old, but lovingly maintained, a bundle of muslin cloth, and a small pouch of spices. The aroma of toasted cumin, clove, and coriander immediately drew curious glances from the nearby competitors. To them, I must have looked out of place. No sous chefs, no expensive gadgets, no liquid nitrogen, set up humming in the background. Just me, a few ingredients, and a plan that would either change my life or end my career before it began. Contestants, you have 2 hours, the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. You may begin. The timer started, and chaos erupted. Lucien's station came alive like a symphony. Assistants darted between burners. Saucepans hissed with reduction, and his French command sliced through the air. He moved with elegance, like a maestro conducting precision itself. This as Ditchikish overheard was in trufles bima and a with lavender smoke. It was the kind of thing that dazzled judges before they even tasted it. Mine, Rogan Josh. A dish my mother used to make when the electricity went out, and the whole family gathered around a flickering lantern, waiting for the rich aroma of slow-braised lamb to fill the night. There was nothing fancy about it, just patience, fire, and heart. I started by heating ghee in a heavy-bottomed pot, letting the nutty aroma build until it felt like home. The first crackle of cardamom pods hit the air, and heads turned. Then came the onions, caramelized until dark and sticky, followed by ginger, garlic, and that perfect moment when the Spiesblom turned to color. Smells like street food. Amelia's voice floated from behind the railing. I didn't look up. That's where real flavor lives, I murmured. Her laugh was sharp. Let's see if the judges agree. The competition floor was a battlefield of sensory overload, truffle shavings, caviar peel, and foams bubbling from canisters that hissed like tiny dragons. My station was quiet in comparison. I moved methodically, tasting, adjusting, coaxing the dish toward perfection. Every bit, like après. About an hour in, Lucien walked past my station under the pretense of reaching for the ice bath. Lamb? He asked, glancing at my pot. Yes, chef. He sniffed lightly, eyebrows raising in faint surprise. Smells good, he admitted, then added with a smirk, but good smells don't win competitions. I met his gaze, calm. Neither does arrogance. For a moment, his expression faltered, just a flicker, before he turned away. The crowd grew thicker as time slipped by. Cameramen swarmed around Lucien's flamboyant plating, edible flowers, gold leaf, geometric precision. My dish, by contrast, looked simple, a bowl of deep red curry, garnished only with a sprinkle of fresh coriander and a swirl of saffron yogurt. I plated it on a handmade clay bowl I'd carried with me since home, its rim chipped and uneven. When the judges approached, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might shake the table. There were 5 of them, culinary legends in their own right. Led by Chef Eleanor Kwan, the iron-willed matriarch of fine dining in New York, her gaze could make or break careers. Lucien presented first. His words flowed like Braidiscrolus, petit détail. The judges nodded appreciatively, tasting with restrained smiles. He stepped back, confident, then it was my turn. I wiped my palms on my apron, and look! D at the judges squarely. This is Rogan Josh, I began, voice steady. It's a Kashmiri lamb stew that takes time, patience, and respect for the ingredients. It's made the way my mother taught me, by feeling, not measuring. The recipe is older than any of us standing here. One of the judges arched an eyebrow. What's special about it? I smiled faintly. It's honest. Every flavor you taste earned its place here. They leaned in. The first spoon broke the surface, releasing a slow cloud of spice and steam that rolled like perfume. The room seemed to still. Chef Kwan took the first bite. Her expression was unreadable, eyes closed, lips pressing together, chewing slowly. Then came another bite, and another. This, she murmured finally, is extraordinary. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. I saw Amelia smirk falter. Another judge spoke next. There's depth here, warmth, the kind of flavor that makes you forget you're at a competition. Lucien's jaw tightened. When the final scores flashed on the board, there was no mistaking it. 97. Taux 84 gamme, a few stances, then applause, head first, then rising like thunder. I stood frozen, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Lucien's face was a mask of disbelief. Amelia looked as though someone had slapped her. I half expected her to storm out, but instead, she just stared at the scoreboard, eyes wide and unblinking. Chef Kwan extended her hand toward me. Conscience, chiffrage malautra. You've just reminded us all what food is supposed to be. I shook her hand, bowing slightly. My heart felt impossibly full. As the cameras flashed, I turned toward Lucien and Amelia. He was still staring at me, the weight of defeat settling into his posture. Amelia met my gaze for the briefest moment, and though she tried to hold her usual disdain, something had shifted behind her eyes. Maybe respect, maybe shame. I stepped closer, just enough for her to hear me over the applause. Next time you call something peasant food, I said quietly. Remember who taught the world how to eat, and then, for the first time since I'd come to this city, I allowed myself to smile, not the smile of a servant, but of a man who'd earned his place. But as the applause faded and the stage lights dimmed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Because humiliation has a way of breeding revenge, and I had just publicly humiliated the Morels. The war had only just begun. The morning after the competition, my phone nearly vibrated off the night on. News outlets, bloggers, culinary influencers, everyone wanted a piece of the story. Underdog, chef from India defeats Michelin legend. Street food outsmarts haute cuisine. My name, Raj Malhotra, was suddenly everywhere. For the first time in years, my rent didn't feel like an unscalable wall. Strangers emailed offers, pop-up collaborations, brand partnerships, guest appearances. Evena. Streaming network reached out about a possible cooking show. It should have felt like victory. It almost did. But beneath the thrill, there was a shadow. Because I knew people like Lucien, morale didn't just lose, they remembered. Still, I told myself not to dwell. That night, I took a long walk through Queens, the city air, sharp with the smell of rain and street food smoke. Every passing car, a very sizzling grill reminded me of home, the narrow lanes of Pune, the scent of turmeric and chili in my mother's kitchen, the nights we'd sit outside and eat by lantern light. I'd carried that flavor across oceans, and it had carried me to victory. When I returned to my small apartment, there was a letter slipped under the door. No envelope, just thick ivory paper, folded neatly. My name was written in perfect cursive. I opened it. Greater than. Congratulations, chef, you made quite the impression. My husband and I would like to extend an invitation to dinner, La Lumiere. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Morel, my pulse slowed. A dinner invitation from Amelia Morel could mean anything. A peace offering. A trap, or both. I almost ignored it. But something inside me whispered, go, face them. The next evening, I arrived at La Lumiere just before 7. The restaurant glowed with warm golden light, its usual crowd of elite diners murmuring over their glasses of Bordeaux. The Motta D spotted me instantly. Ah, Chef Malhotra, he said, his smile rehearsed. Right this way. He led me not to the main dining room, but to a private section cordoned off with velvet curtains. When I stepped inside, Amelia was already there, alone, sitting with a glass of red wine, her poise as perfect as ever. Chef Raj, she greeted, her voice smooth as silk. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either, I admitted, taking the seat opposite her. You, husband, not joining us. She smiled faintly. Lucien doesn't take defeat well. He's reflecting. I repeated. Is that what you call it? Her laugh was quiet, amused. You think we're monsters, don't you? I think you're used to winning, I said evenly. She leaned forward slightly, studying me. You're different from the others. Most people who lose or win. Around us, they want something for approval, validation, attention. But you, she tilted her head. You wanted respect. And you got it. Didn't need your permission, I said. Of course not. She swirled her wine, watching it catch the light. But you'll find, chef, that winning isn't as easy to sustain as it is to achieve. Especially when you've embarrassed powerful people. I didn't embarrass anyone. I said, I just cooked. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You did more than that. You challenged the system. You exposed the fragility of it. That makes people nervous. The waiter entered silently, placing two plates before us. Première glancette d'un dutchery glaze, her husband's signature dish. Lucien wanted you to taste it again, she said softly. He said you'd appreciate it more now. I hesitated. And what happens if I don't? She raised her glass. Then perhaps you'll understand that this world doesn't forgive those who forget their place. There it was, the threat, wrapped in civility. I met her gaze, unflinching. My place, I said, is wherever the food speaks louder than the name on the menu. 4. A moment, the mask slipped. Her eyes hardened, lips tightening just slightly before. She smiled again. You really believe that sincerity can survive in this industry? I believe it's the only thing that does. We ate mostly in silence after that. The duck was flawless, rich, balanced, and technically perfect, but it felt hollow, soulless, like a song. Played by someone who'd forgotten why they wrote it. When I finished, I stood. Thank you for dinner, I said. Tell your husband the dish is excellent. But flavor without heart is just decoration. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Chef Raj, I looked back. Don't mistake applause for protection, she said, her tone low, almost intimate. This city loves a story. But it loves to destroy one even more. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then I left. That night, as I rode the train home, her words echoed in my mind. Destroy one even more. I brushed it off as arrogance, but within a week, her warnings started taking shape. First, the press cooled off. The interviews got cancelled. A food critic published a lukewarm piece hinting that my victory had been sentimental, not skill-based. Then a partnership deal pulled out without explanation. À la lumière running, cheated, that the judges had been biased, that my dish had violated rules about ingredient sourcing. I received a letter from the Silver Spoon Committee requesting an internal review. By the time I met with my lawyer, half my upcoming opportunities had evaporated. Someone's pulling strings, he said grimly. And they've got reach. There was no mystery who it was. Amelia had given me the warning as both a courtesy and a declaration. They weren't done. But neither was I. I'd spent my whole life clawing out of obscurity. I hadn't come this far to be buried again under the weight of someone else's ego, so I made a decision. I would open my own restaurant, not a fine dining imitation, but something honest, raw, and real. A place where people could taste the fire, the soil, the memory. A place that didn't need permission to exist. I found an old brick space in Jackson Heights, still smelling faintly of old bread and dust. I named it Usha. Hope. The night we opened, I cooked every dish myself. The line was out the door. By midnight, we'd sold out. But as I stood there, sweat-soaked and elated, watching customers lick curry from their fingers and smile like they'd found home, I noticed a figure standing across the street. A woman in a dark coat, watching. Even from a distance, I knew that silhouette. Amelia Morel. And beside her, half in shadow, stood Lucien, his face unreadable, his hands clasped behind his back. They didn't move. They just watched, and in that quiet, I realized something. The competition wasn't over. It had only changed venues. For weeks after that night, the Morels became ghosts at the edges of my world, always unseen, but somehow present. Whenever I looked out the window, at closing time, a black car seemed to linger too long at the curb before gliding away. A food critic would come in, unannounced, order my signature lamb curry, and leave without comment, only for a scathing, oddly personal review to appear days later under a pseudonym. I told myself I didn't care. The customers loved Usha. Every night the line reached down the block. Every table was filled with people laughing over clay bowls and tearing into fresh naan. For the first time since leaving home, I felt alive, seen. Then came the inspection. It was a Friday afternoon. Right before the dinner, rush when two men in black suits and an official-looking woman walked in. Department of Health, one of them said, flashing a badge. We've received a complaint about improper food handling and unsafe kitchen conditions. I froze. The woman began walking through the kitchen with a clipboard, checking labels, containers, thermometers. Everything was clean. We'd built Usha from the ground up with our bare hands. But then she opened the walk-in cooler and frowned. This meat, she said, tapping a container. Not labeled. It's marinated lamb, I said quickly. Prepared this morning for dinner service without a date tag. It must have fallen off. Violation. Her tone was flat, professional, but final. Within 20 minutes. She'd marked 7 infractions, minor things, but enough for a fine and a temporary closure order. When to left, I sat down my hands. Around me, the smells of turmeric, smoke, and despair mixed into something bitter. Diego, my sous chef, crouched beside me. Raj, this isn't random. You know that, right? I nodded slowly. It's them, he sighed. You should fight it. Oh, I will, I said quietly. But not in their world. In mine. Next morning, I called a friendly Kapor, a journal post-cussion perk. She was sharp, fearless, and allergic to corruption. When I told her what had happened, she didn't even hesitate. Send me everything, she said. The paperwork, the complaint number, the inspector's name. I'll find out who pushed it through. A week later, she called me back. You were right, she said. Guess who personally forwarded the complaint to the health department? A certain Morel Foundation for Culinary Integrity. I laughed bitterly. Integrity, that's rich. They've been busy, Lena continued. There's more. Word is, they're planning a new restaurant, right here in Queens. Guess the theme. I didn't need to guess. Indian fusion, yep, but not the real kind. It's called Saffron Atelier. And get this, Amelia's listed as co-owner. Lucien's the head chef. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They're coming for me. Then hit back, Lena said. Not with lawyers, with flavor, with truth. Her words sank deep. That night, I called in. Emergency, meeting with my team. We're not going to fight them in court, I said. We're going to fight them in the kitchen. They think they can buy authenticity, steal it, wear it like a costume. But we're going to show them the difference between imitation and soul, Diego grinned. What's the plan? War. We started small. Street pop-ups, community dinners, charity events. No PR, no gimmicks. Just honest food. People came because it meant something. And slowly, word began to spread again. When Usher reopened, it wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a movement. The flavors were bolder, the stories behind each dish printed on the menus. My mother's photo hung above the counter, her hands stained with spice and love. The line outside tripled. Then came the night the Morels made the next move. A courier arrived at closing time with a sleek black envelope embossed with gold. Inside was an invitation, thick cardstock. Elegant font. You are cordially invited to the grand opening of Saffron Atelier, an innovative celebration of Indo-French gastronomy. Executive chef, Lucien Morel. Creative director, Amelia Morel. And at the bottom, in looping handwriting, we'd love for you to see what true refinement looks like. I could almost hear her voice in the ink. Diego saw my expression. You're not seriously going, are you? Oh, I'm going, I said, folding the card. But not as a guest. The night of the opening, Saffron Atelier looked like something out of a fashion magazine. Chandeliers dripping light, walls lined with saffron-colored silk, and a clientele of critics, celebrities, and socialites. Cameras flashed as Amelia posed beside her husband, the perfect image of elegance and power. I waited until the crowd had thinned, then walked in through the front door. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. Amelia spotted me immediately. Raj, she said, her voice bright, with mock surprise. How bold of you to come. Lucien smirked beside her. Come to see what real innovation looks like. I ignored them, letting my eyes sweep over the menu. Tandoori duck à l'orange, foie gras samosa, curry fond ravioli. Each dish was a Frankenstein of stolen culture, a mockery dressed in luxury. Nice menu, I said softly. Did you write it before, or after Googling authentic Indian flavors? A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the crowd. Amelia's smile faltered, just for a moment. Careful, chef, she said. We wouldn't want your bitterness to ruin your palate. Oh, don't worry, I said. My palate's fine. But yours, I leaned in slightly, seems to have forgotten. The different tween borrowed, Lindstoln's flag said, stepping back. After I've tasted the dish you built on my culture's bones, I picked up a fork. Sampling ter foie gras samovre, Matarovich. I set the fork down. Pretty, I said, but dead inside, and then I left. Outside, cameras flashed as I stepped into the night, the neon sign of Saffron Atelier reflecting in the puddles like a wound. By morning, a viral clip was circulating online. Someone had recorded the entire confrontation. Within hours, it exploded. Raj Malhotra calls out cultural, theft at celebrity, restaurant. The internet took sides. Some called me brave, others called me reckless. But the tides were turning again. This one deep down, I knew it was anything far bigger. Because in the culinary world, war isn't fought with weapons. It's fought with flavor, and memory, and truth, and I had all three. The days following that confrontation were like standing in the middle of a storm made of applause and knives. Every news outlet in New York had something to say. Raj Malhotra strikes again. The Morels face cultural reckoning. History chef versus culinary world. Round, I was a hero. The other half thought I was an arrogant loudmouth who disrespected a prestigious couple in their own restaurant. And the Morels, they went silent, completely silent. That silence was worse than their laughter. It meant they were planning. Something. Mir schweigt customers kimmers to belong. The line wrapped around the block. Food critics who'd once ignored me now wrote pieces about the poetry of spice and the democratization of taste, but I didn't let it go to my head. Because fame is like steam, it makes things rise, but it disappears fast. One evening, as I was plating the last. Orde, mi fun buzzed. It was Lena. Raj, you need to see this. She sent a link. It was a teaser for a new TV series, Fire and Silk, The Fusion Revolution, produced by the Morel Foundation. The trailer was slick, slow pans over vibrant spices, golden oil shimmering in a pan. Amelia's voice narrating in her velvet accent. For too long, authenticity has been used as a cage. We are here to redefine it. Then the camera cut to Lucien in his immaculate chef's whites, sprinkling saffron over a dish that looked suspiciously like my lamb curry, plated, of course, with the artistic sterility of haute cuisine. My jaw clenched. They weren't just stealing flavors anymore. They were rewriting the narrative, positioning themselves as pioneers of cross-cultural gastronomy. And to make it worse, the final scene showed Amelia smiling into the camera, greater than. We'll be exploring forgotten traditions from around the world. Starting in India, I could feel the rage rise like a slow, molten tide. They were coming to my home turf. A week later, Fire and Silk premiered. The first Shandelili, pretending to marvel at the vibrant chaos of Indian street food. Amelia describes the humble origins of curry, while locals stood behind them, watching quietly, their expressions unreadable. Tekale did culinary wallet with subtitles. The world editorly. The show became a hit overnight. Every streaming service banned their faces. The restaurant Safran Atelier was booked out for months. But it was the third episode that pushed me over the edge. They featured a dish called Rogan Nouvelle. The recipe, the plating, even the garnish. My recipe. The one that won me the silver spoon. And worse, they never mentioned me. Not once. That night, I barely slept. My mother called from India. She had seen the episode. Beta, she said softly, they used your food. I know, she was quiet for a long time. Denoin. Her calm, steady voice, she said, when people steal your fire, you don't chase them. You light another one, so bright that this looks like smoke. I stared at the ceiling. You think I can? I know you can. You are my son. That was all I needed. 2 days later, I announced Usher Nights, a 6-week pop-up culinary series celebrating the untold origins of Indian cuisine. Each event would feature a different regional dish, served in storytelling format. No fusion, no gimmicks, just real food and real stories. The first night sold out in under an hour. We transformed the restaurant into a memory. Brass lamps, woven mats, music that sounded like rain on rooftops. Each course was introduced with a story, not from books, but from the mouths of farmers, fishermen, and grandmothers. People didn't just eat, they felt. Videos went viral. Food journalists called it culinary theater. The New York Times featured it on the front page of their food section. Within 3 weeks, Usher had become the city's hottest ticket. And that's when the Morels came knocking again. Not figuratively, but literally. It was a rainy Wednesday when my hostess whispered, "Chef, Teresa. Couple asking for you." Tessie well went the kitchen. Lucien and Amelia stood at the bar, soaked from the rain, but looking impossibly composed, like they'd walked out of a Vogue photo shoot in a storm. "Chef Raj," Amelia said, smiling faintly. "You're a difficult man to reach. I figured you'd find a way," I replied. Lucien leaned forward, his tone deceptively polite. We should talk. Privately. I crossed my arms. I prefer honesty in public. She arched an eyebrow. Always the performer. What do you want? A partnership, Amelia said simply. That made me laugh. You're joking. No, she said, her voice steady. We're offering to collaborate. Saffron Atelier X Usher, a culinary exchange. You'd have creative control over the Indian segment. Lucien would oversee the European one. 50-50, Lucien added. You'd have access to our investors, our networks. Michelin attention, international press. You'd be untouchable. I looked between them. Why? You've spent Masazov to Nedar too. Because the world is changing, Rog, and right now, you are the face of that change. Wakuldete. Faite you are. Join you. I took a deep breath, staring at the rain, running down the windows like streaks of silver. For a moment, I almost considered it power, reach, recognition, but then I remembered my mother's words. Light your own fire. I smiled, slow, deliberate. You're offering me a seat at your table, I said. Boutique sans terme. Building my own. Lucien's jaw tightened. Amelia tilt eglinting. Be careful, Raj. You're still playing our game. You just don't realize it yet. Then maybe it's time to change the rules. They left without another word. But à d'or. Closed behind them, I caught the faintest flicker in Amelia's expression. Not anger. Not contempt. Something closer to admiration. Or maybe calculation. That night, Usher stayed full. Until 2 a.m., the rain kept falling outside, and I cooked like a man possessed, each dish a declaration, each flavor a rebellion. The Morels wanted a war of image. I was preparing a war of soul. But even I didn't know what. They were planning next, the move that would turn this quiet culinary feud into something far more dangerous, something that would push me to the edge of everything I'd built. Because a week later, a headline appeared that changed everything. Saffron Atelier announces global competition. $500,000 prize for culinary innovation, hosted by Lucien and Amelia Morel. And in smaller letters beneath, first invite goes to Chef Raj Malhotra. The envelope arrived the next morning. Black. Thick and expensive, with gold lettering that caught the sunlight like a dare. Inside was an embossed invitation. The Saffron Atelier World Culinary Challenge greater than hosted by Lucien, and Amelia Morel greater than grand prize. $500,000 greater than. Venus Château de Montreux, Switzerland. Contestants, by personal invitation only at the bottom. In Amelia's looping handwriting was a message that made my pulse tighten. Greater than. One last test. Chef, let's see if lightning strikes twice. I stood in the kitchen. The letter trembling between my fingers, the smell of simmering turmeric and ghee grounding me in the present. My team gathered around as I reread it aloud. Diego whistled low. $500,000? That's not a competition. That's a declaration of war. Lena's message came through seconds later. Don't go. It's a trap. But I already knew I was going. Not for the money, not even for revenge, but because this was the battlefield they'd chosen, and I refused to run from it. By the time I landed in Switzerland 2 weeks later, the world was watching. Every major food network, every journalist, every Michelin inspector had converged on the chateau perched above Lake Geneva. The Morels had turned their competition into a spectacle, gold-plated stages. Live streaming, a judging panel that looked like a summit of culinary royalty. The contestants were a mix of talent and ego, chefs from Tokyo, Paris, Buenos Aires, and one from Cape Town, whose molecular gastronomy videos had millions of views. I was the wildcard again, the underdog in a field of pedigrees and prestige. When I checked into the hotel, a staff member handed me a sealed envelope with the competition rules. I scanned them quickly. Identical kitchen setups, 2 rounds, final cook-off between the top 2 chefs. Ingredients would be revealed only moments before each round. At the end of the document, a single line was handwritten. Greater than the past and future will share a plate that was pure Amelia, poetic, cryptic, manipulative. On the morning of the competition, the air was electric. Cameras buzzed, drones hovered, and the judges, a panel of 6, including Chef Eleanor Kwan again, took their seats. Lucien and Amelia walked onto the stage like royalty entering court. She wore a white silk suit. He wore black chef's whites embroidered with the Atelier crest. Together, they looked invincible. "Welcome, chefs," Amelia began, her voice echoing across the hall. "Today, we are here not just to cook, but to define the future of cuisine. Tradition meets innovation, soul meets science. And only one will prevail." Her gaze slid to me as she said it. Then, the first challenge was revealed. "Reimagine a dish from your childhood using modern techniques." A murmur rippled through the room. Childhood, the one thing you couldn't fake. I thought instantly of home, my mother's roti puffing over open flame, the tang of tamarind chutney, the crackle of mustard, seeds in hot oil. That was my soul, but I knew Lucien's strategy. He'd go for spectacle. Nitrogen, foams, dehydrated essences. He'd bury emotion beneath precision. We had 2 hours. I started by roasting cumin and coriander seeds, their scent winding through the kitchen like memory itself. Around me, other chefs. Clattered and flamed, but my world narrowed to rhythm and heat. I made lamb koftas, the kind my father used to buy from a street vendor on Sunday afternoons, but reimagined them. Instead of skewers, I formed miniature spheres infused with saffron and cardamom. Served on crisp rice wafers glazed with tamarind reduction, each movement was deliberate. Each choice had a heartbeat. Across the stage, Lucien was assembling what looked like a deconstructed cassolette with hints of curry, a theatrical echo of what he imagined my food to be. Amelia stood behind him, murmuring something I couldn't hear. The clock hit 0. Judging began. Chef Kwan approached mine first. She studied the plate. Small, simple, unapologetically. "Indian, tell us about your dish, Chef Malhotra. It's called Bizarre Memory," I said. "A tribute to the flavors that built me. Everything you see here, the smoke, the spice, the sweetness, comes from a street vendor's grill in my hometown. I've only changed the form, not the soul." She nodded slowly, tasting. For a second, silence. Then a small smile. Beautiful balance. Lucien's dish, of course, was perfect, glossy, architectural. The kind of food that photographs well, but dies in the mouth. When the scores came up, mine edged his by 2 points. Round 1, Rog Malhotra -94, Lucien Morel -92. The crowd erupted. For the mass cracked, Ameliaklaped once, Sharonidal. Round 2 began an hour later. The challenge: create a dish that represents the future of food. Now that was Lucien's domain. He immediately pulled out canisters of liquid nitrogen, centrifuges, molecular emulsifiers. His lab looked like an alchemist's dream. Meanwhile, I stared at my ingredients: grains, roots, legumes, oils, future. Food. Sustainable food. And then it hit me. The future wasn't about invention. It was about preservation. I made khichdi. Simple, ancient, comforting. But instead of a pot, I built it as an edible landscape, lentil puree forming the earth. Crispy rice tulle as terrain, vegetables arranged like seedlings pushing through. I called it soil and sky. When the final timer buzzed, I stepped back, heart hammering. Judges moved down the line. They tasted Lucien's dish first, a floating orb of flavor vapor, released with a hiss of nitrogen. It dazzled the eyes but faded from the tongue in seconds. Then they came to me. Chef Kwan took a bite. Her eyes softened. "This," she said quietly, "is hope in edible form." Lucien's face went white. Amelia's hand tightened. On the edge of the table, the scores appeared. Rach Malhotra, ke-98 luzurel -90 iet again. The hall exploded. Cameras flashed. People shouted. I barely heard them. My chest was full of something fierce and trembling. Not pride, but relief. Lucien stood frozen, his jaw tight, eyes burning with humiliation. Amelia touched his arm gently, but he pulled away. For the first time, the mask of perfection cracked. As the confetti fell and reporters surged forward, she met my gaze across the chaos. There was no smirk this time. No contempt, only quiet calculation, and maybe, for the briefest instant, respect. Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the lights dimmed, I walked the quiet path behind the chateau. The lake shimmered below like glass. That's when I heard footsteps. "Congratulations," Amelia's voice said softly. I turned. She stood a few feet away, no longer the poised public figure, just a woman, stripped of artifice. Her hair was loose, her voice tired. "You finally beat us," she said. "Completely," I shook my head. I wasn't trying to beat you. She smiled faintly. Then you der moment. Where you stood. There, two sides of the same coin, forged by fire, ambition, and hunger. She stepped closer. You know, Raj. Sometimes, when you destroy the king, the queen doesn't fall. Then she slipped something into my hand, a business card, black with gold lettering. On it was just one line. Greater the next course begins soon. And before I could say a word, she turned and vanished into the dark. Tatua! The moment I realized the truth, I hadn't ended the war. I had just entered the next level of it. I didn't sleep that night, even as the world celebrated. As headlines poured in, Raj Malhotra, the man who redefined fine dining, from peasant food to global icon, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at that sleek black card on the table. Next course begins soon. Amelias. Handwriting danced across the surface like a whisper that refused to die. By morning, the internet had crowned me the symbol of culinary rebellion. The Morel's silence only added fuel. Commentators speculated that Lucien had stormed out of the chateau before the awards dinner, that Amelia had been seen alone at the after-party, smiling with that peculiar calm of someone who knows the storm isn't over, just gathering strength. And maybe she was right. Because 3 weeks later, I received another letter. This one wasn't embossed. It was handwritten, smudged slightly, as though whoever wrote it had been drinking. Chef Malhotra left me. She says she's going to pursue culinary truth, whatever that means. But we both know what she's really after. You, greater than meet me. On las timps par you rue de Grenelle, grumier then. Lucien, Morel, I read it twice. Then a third time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like desperation. Against my better judgment and every warning bell ringing in my head. I went. Paris was rain-soaked and grey when I arrived. The air smelled like wet stone and espresso. The address led me to a small cafe tucked between an art gallery and a bookstore, the kind of place where time seemed to pause between heartbeats. Lucien was already there, sitting by the window with a glass of whiskey, half empty before noon. He looked nothing like the immaculate chef I'd seen on television. His jacket was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes empty. Raj, he said as I approached. You actually came. I wasn't sure if I should. Neither was I. He gestured for me to sit, but here we are. To men who ruined each other's lives for the sake of a plate, I didn't ruin yours, Lucien. You chose your war. He laughed bitterly. War. You think this was war? No, my friend. This was theater. Amelia's theater. You and I were just the actors. Something in his voice made me pause. What do you mean? He leaned in, his voice lowering to a rasp. She wanted this. Every part of it. The competition, the feud, the press, all of it. You think she lost? Look around. She's the most talked about culinary mind in the world, right now. Not me. Not you. Her. I frowned. You're saying she orchestrated everything. She didn't just orchestrate it. She directed it. He took another sip, his hand shaking slightly. She saw your talent years ago. Said you were the spark the industry needed. Said if she couldn't control it, she'd make sure it burned everything down, including me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. So what is she doing now? He smiled weakly. Something new. Something dangerous. She's in Mumbai. Mumbai. He nodded. She's opening a culinary institute. Maison du Sol says she wants to teach the art of culinary truth, but we both know what that means. I did. It meant she was going to claim authenticity as her next empire. Before I could respond, Lucien's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening. Then he slid it across the table. On the screen was a news headline. Amelia Morel announces partnership with Indian government to launch global culinary education program. Below it, a photo est faire radiant confident, standing of a banner that were empowering local chefs for Wamimote. I froze. The caption read, Amelia Morel with Usher. De vie Malhotra renowned children rider. How the hell? She found her, Lucien said quietly. She's using her. Just like she used us. The rest of the conversation blurred after that. I remember leaving the cafe, the Parisian rain cold against my skin, my hands shaking. Could record video, yet there she was, standing beside the woman who had spent years dismantling everything I stood for. By the time my flight landed in Mumbai the next evening, The news had exploded across Indian media. French visionary partners with local talent to revolutionize Indian cuisine. Photos of Amelia in a silk sari filled every feed, the perfect savior of cultural authenticity. Aunt Mimote? She looked proud, unaware. I went straight from the airport to her house. She was in the backyard, tending to her spice garden, humming to herself. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Rog," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "You didn't tell me you were coming." I hugged her tightly, my voice breaking. "Ma, what are you doing with her?" She frowned. "With who?" "Amelia? She's helping me share my recipes." She said people abroad need to know what real Indian food tastes like. I pulled back, my voice low. "She's using you. Ma, she's using us." My mother looked at me for a long time, her eyes soft but firm. "Beta, not everything is a fight. It is when she turns our stories into her brand," I said. "She's taking what we built and making it hers again." She sighed. Then back it back, but not with anger. With truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Outside, the Mumbai skyline pulsed with light, alive and restless. Somewhere across the city, Amelia Morel was building her new empire on the ashes of my heritage. I opened my phone, went live on my social media account, and started to talk. I talked about stolen recipes, about culinary imperialism, about how authenticity isn't a costume you can wear when convenient. I told them the story, my mother's story, our story. The stream, hundreds, thousands of viewers. By morning, it had millions. Chefs from around the world began sharing it, posting their own stories of cultural erasure. A movement started. Hashtags flooded the internet. Hashtag own your flavor. Hashtag true roots. Hashtag Usher lives. When the media cornered Amelia the next day, her smile was thin. "Chef Malhotra has always been emotional," she said. "We share the same goal, to elevate tradition, but the world wasn't buying it this time. The veil had torn. Hawitawik, Mason Tissot with Protzers, began pulling out, and then, one morning, she called me. "Impressive," she said, her tone cold. "You've learned to play my game." "No," I said. "I learned to change the board." She was silent for a moment. Then, softly, "You realize you've just made yourself untouchable. No one can use you anymore." "Not even me. That's the point. Then congratulations." "Chef, you've become what I always wanted to be," and before I could respond, she hung up. Weeks later, Maison du Sol shuttered. The Morel empire fractured. Lucien disappeared from public life. Amelia went silent again. As for me, I returned home, stood beside my mother in the kitchen, and cooked the same dish that started it all. Slow-braised lamb, hand-ground spices, soft roti. No cameras, no audience, no trophies. Just us. When she tasted it, she smiled. "You finally made it right," she said. I looked down at the steaming bowl. "Took a war to get here." She shook her head gently. "No, Beta. It took remembering who you were." Outside, the night filled with the scent of cumin and cardamom, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. But sometimes that latatenai, I still think Amelta to be. And I wonder if, somewhere out there, she's still watching, waiting for the next course to begin. A few months passed, and the chaos finally quieted. The headlines faded, the protests subsided, and for the first time in years, my name wasn't trending on social media. And I was grateful for it. Usher had become more than a restaurant now. It was a philosophy. Chefs from across India came to train under us, to learn not just recipes, but reverence. The air in our kitchen hummed with the rhythm of something old and enduring, the sound of wooden ladles on copper pots. Laughter between service, spices crushed by hand instead of machine. It was not fun. That kept the lights burning. It was love. Still, fame has a way of lingering, like smoking cloth. One afternoon, while I was teaching a group of apprentices how to balance garam masala ratios, a courier arrived. Another envelope. My stomach tightened when I saw the handwriting. Precise, elegant, unmistakable. Amelia Morel. I tore it open. Greater than. Chef Malhotra, you already left the city. Greater than no interviews, no cameras, just silence. But before I disappear, there is something you should know. Something I never told you. Greater than. Meet me where it all began. Greater than. La lumière au midnight did not make sense. La Lumière had closed months ago. After the fallout, its investors had pulled out, the property sold, its golden sign stripped from the facade. But curiosity ausarkerd. Me there anyway. By the time I arrived, Mumbai's midnight had melted into stillness. The old restaurant sat like a skeleton of its former self, shutters half open, dust collecting where truffles once gleamed. The faint scent of burned butter still lingered, like the ghost of an empire. She was there, sitting alone in the darkened dining hall, a single candle flickering before her. She looked smaller somehow, not frail, but real. Gone were the silk, suits and diamond cuffs. Shiwara. Plain white dress, her hair loose, her eyes tired. Rog, she said quietly, as if saying my name hurt. You came. I didn't sit. What is this? A goodbye. To what? To everything I built. To everything I destroyed. The words hung between us like smoke. She looked around the ruined dining room, then smiled faintly. Do you know what the real curse of genius is? It's not failure. It's never being. Full. You win. You taste victory, and it fills you for a heartbeat. Then you're hungry again. Always hungry. I said nothing. She gestured toward the candle. Do you remember the first time you cooked in this kitchen? How could I forget? You had nothing, she said softly. No pedigree, no name, just fire. I saw it the moment you walked in. You didn't cook to impress. You cooked to heal. Première envietat. I tried to bottle it, to steal it, to wear it like perfume. Her voice trembled now. But it never belonged to me. I studied her face, the woman who had made my life a battlefield, who had turned my culture into currency. And, for the first time, I saw not the predator, but the person beneath. You could have stopped, I said. She smiled sadly. No, Raj, people like me don't stop. We only burn until there's nothing left, the silence stretched, heavy as memory. Then she reached into her bag and slid something across the table, a small, leather-bound notebook. My journals, she said, every recipe I took, every idea I borrowed, every truth I twisted, they belong to you now. I didn't move. Why? Because I'm tired, she whispered. And because you're the only one who still remembers what food means. You can finish what I never could, tell the truth. Her voice cracked on the last word. I finally sat down, the candle flickering between us. What truth, Amelia? She looked at me, eyes glistening. That food isn't about who makes it better. It's about who makes it matter. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she stood, slow and deliberate, like someone shedding weight. Goodbye, Chef Malhotra. Where will you go? She smiled faintly. Somewhere no one knows my name. Maybe I'll finally learn to cook something real. And before I could answer, she walked out past the tables, past the ghosts of applause, envy. The door swung shut behind her with a soft sigh. When the echo faded, I opened the notebook. Inside were pages upon pages of recipes, scribbles, fragments of thought. Some were stolen straight from chefs she'd crushed. Back, I found something that made me stop. It was a single line, written in small, neat handwriting, greater than he was right. Peasant, food fed the world. I closed the book and sat there until the candle burned out. Months later, when I published Usher, The Honest Table, I included one chapter titled The Ghost Who Fed Me. I didn't name her. But I told the story, not of rivalry, but of redemption. The book became a manifesto. Chefs around the world began rethinking their food, their stories, their roots. Culinary, schools started teaching the ethics of ownership. Usher became a sanctuary for authenticity, not just a restaurant. And sometimes, when the air outside smells like rain and cumin, I imagine her somewhere far away, standing in a small kitchen. Sleeves rolled up, cutting onions by hand, not for a camera, not for a critic, but for herself, cooking something real. That's when I finally understood what victory truly meant. It wasn't he winning the prize, the fame, or even the respect. It was knowing that, in the end, my mother was right all along. When people steal your fire, you don't chase them. You light another one. And you let the world come to it. A year later, Usher was no longer just a restaurant, it was a legacy. The movement we had sparked had grown into something bigger than I could have imagined. Across continents, chefs began reclaiming their roots, telling their stories through their food without apology or disguise. Street vendors were being profiled in major magazines. Indigenous ingredients were being celebrated instead of mocked. The culinary world, once ruled by spectacle and pretension, was finally beginning to listen to the quiet heartbeat of authenticity. But for me, the noise had faded. Fame came, stayed for a while, and moved on to its next obsession. I didn't chase it. I didn't need to. Each morning, I arrived at Usher before sunrise, the kitchen still half asleep. The city outside was busy, but in those earlier hours, it was uninformed. And the slow rhythm of my mother's old songs playing in my head. We'd expanded. Sure, more staff, new dishes, new faces, but the heart of it hadn't changed. We still served the same slow-braised lamb that started everything. I still greeted every guest I could, because I never wanted to forget the faces behind the plates. One evening, as the last customers left and the restaurant quieted down, Diego came into the kitchen with a small package, no return address. Inside was a jar, homemade mango pickle, sealed tight, and a single note, greater than for the man who taught me to taste again. Thank you. I smiled. For a long time, I just stood there, holding that the being truffles the fike, the hungunger truth. Premier did not know where she was now. Maybe in some small coastal town, teaching a handful of locals how to temper spices properly. Maybe sitting by the sea, tasting her own cooking for the first time without judgment. Wherever she was, I hoped she'd found peace. Later that night, I walked outside. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of cumin and rain. Across the street, a group of young cooks were laughing, carrying leftover bread to a nearby shelter. Usher's sign glowed behind me, the letters flickering softly like fireflies. I thought of the long road that had brought me here, from scrubbing pans in La Lumiere's kitchen to standing beneath a sign that bore my mother's name. I thought of the humiliation, the defiance, the battles fought not with fists but with flavor. And I thought of her words. When people steal your fire, you don't chase them. You light another one. I looked up at the sky, the city lights glowing faintly through the monsoon haze, and whispered to no one in particular, maybe to Amelia, maybe to my mother, maybe to the boy, gee, here's to the fire that never goes out. Then back inside, Timmy uphold, and stir the coals. Histi burned, stirks at whatever you want, baby. Began with the same simple, sacred act, a hand, a flame, and a promise to feed the world, one honest meal at a time. Tea winning the prize, the fame, or even the respect. It was knowing that, in the end, my mother was right all along. When people steal your fire, you don't chase them. You light another one, and you let the world come to it. A year later, Usher was no longer just a restaurant, it was a legacy. The movement we had sparked had grown into something bigger than I could have imagined. Across continents, chefs began reclaiming their roots, telling their stories through their food without apology or disguise. Street vendors were being profiled in major magazines. Indigenous ingredients were being celebrated instead of mocked. The culinary world, once ruled by spectacle and pretension, was finally beginning to listen to the quiet heartbeat of authenticity. But for me, the noise had faded. Fame came, stayed for a while, and moved on to its next obsession. I didn't chase it. I didn't need to. Each morning, I arrived at Usher before sunrise, the kitchen still half asleep. The city outside was busy, but in those earlier hours, it was uninformed. And the slow rhythm of my mother's old songs playing in my head. We'd expanded. Sure, more staff, new dishes, new faces, but the heart of it hadn't changed. We still served the same slow-braised lamb that started everything. I still greeted every guest I could, because I never wanted to forget the faces behind the plates. One evening, as the last customers left and the restaurant quieted down, Diego came into the kitchen with a small package, no return address. Inside was a jar, homemade mango pickle, sealed tight, and a single note, greater than for the man who taught me to taste again. Thank you. I smiled. For a long time, I just stood there, holding a bean trough to fight the fire. The truth, I didn't know where she was now. Maybe in some small coastal town, teaching a handful of locals how to temper spices properly. Maybe sitting by the sea, tasting her own cooking for the first time without judgment. Wherever she was, I hoped she'd found peace. Later that night, I walked outside. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of cumin and rain. Across the street, a group of young cooks were laughing, carrying leftover bread to a nearby shelter. Usher's sign glowed behind me, the letters flickering softly like fireflies. I thought of the long road that had brought me here, from scrubbing pans in La Lumiere's kitchen to standing beneath a sign that bore my mother's name. I thought of the humiliation, the defiance, the battles fought not with fists but with flavor, and I thought of her words. When people steal your fire, you don't chase them, you light another one. I looked up at the sky, the city lights glowing faintly through the monsoon haze, and whispered to no one in particular, maybe to Amelia, maybe. Domimote, maybe je te never goes out. Tiens m'y apprends. And stepped into the kitchen, where the coals still burned, where stories still simmered, and where the next dish, like everyone before it, began with the same simple, sacred act. A hand, a flame, and a promise to feed the world, one honest meal at a time. They didn't know I was filming them when they fought over the fake eviction notice. The screaming, the tears, the raw panic. It was the most authentic moment any of them had ever given me, and not one of them realized the cameras had been rolling. When the footage aired 6 weeks later under the title, Unreal, the house they built, millions of viewers watched them implode in real time. Butoir, world never saw what no one was ever supposed to see was how I'd orchestrated every second of it. It all started with a message from Tessa. She'd been one of those people who lived for attention, always chasing a lens, even when no one was watching. You ever think about making a show? She'd asked, leaning against the hood of her car like it was a throne. Something raw, something real. None of that fake crying and scripted drama. At the time, I was barely keeping my production company alive. Reality TV had eaten itself years ago, the market bloated with recycled concepts and faces that blurred together. But Tessa had that quality, volatile, magnetic, impossible to look away from. She wasn't asking for fame. She was demanding an audience. And she wasn't alone. Tessa introduced me to the others, Jake, the failed influencer, with a gym addiction and a crumbling ego. Laura, his ex-girlfriend turned wellness guru, who spoke in affirmations but looked like she might shatter. And Dom, a trust fund parasite who called himself an entrepreneur because he once sold sneakers on Instagram. They all had one thing in common, a bottomless hunger for validation. They wanted to be seen, to be adored, to matter. So I gave them what they wanted. I told them I was developing a palette of reality show some curiosity. We rented a house just outside Los Angeles, State Princess Freemanshire, neon lighty, Arizibri, premier tal témoin des stats shooting. Into week one assembled. But what they didn't know was that I had already installed the cameras hidden in vents, mirrors, picture frames, even the refrigerator door. The first few days were chaos. They preened and posed, filmed TikToks, and bickered about follower counts. I watched from my office across town, sipping cold coffee, while their lives unfolded on a dozen monitors. They thought they were rehearsing, but I was already recording. Every whispered confession, every backhanded compliment, every late night hookup, they were all mine now. The first real crack appeared when Tessa caught Lara deleting one of her videos from the communal account. "You're jealous," Tessa hissed, slamming her phone down on the kitchen counter. "You cannot lust. Stand that people actually like me." Lara's calm mask slipped for the first time. "People like watching you self-destruct," she shot back. "I'm just giving them what they want." Their voices rose, overlapping until it was impossible to tell who was right. Jake came in shirtless, trying to play mediator, but his eyes lingered too long on Laura. Dom filmed,